Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug
I'm
Sharp.
your co-host, Rich Gear, here with you as well. And I'm kind of excited, Doug, about the subject tonight, really. It's just going to be kind of an adventure through really God's creation. And it is. It's God's creation is pure joy. That's the title of our show
That's
tonight.
the title of our show tonight. And this is sort of departing a little bit from the hard scientific arguments.
Kind of like, we'll be like a travel log a little bit, maybe.
A little bit, because we've been some places where it's been very close to the Garden of Eden in many ways, and some of the different things that we've been able to experience. And I also want to recount with you some moments that we have had where you could really sense the presence of God. And that's something that is really possible for us. And it's not something that you can really describe scientifically, it's but it's more of an emotional feeling, or if you just maybe close your eyes a little bit and just imagine and relax and think of the times when you are closest to God. I sort of recount, the time when I've been out turkey hunting with my brother.
Yeah, that surprised me. You enjoy being out in the woods in the cool of the morning.
Not so much the hunting part of it, that's kind of interesting too. But that brings
us back to the reality. We live in a fallen world,
right?
Doug,
But this was a time where I remember I was out with him, and we had set up. We're all in a camouflage, and we set up our little blind where we were at, and we were just sitting there very still and waiting. And I could just at that time sense the presence of God. You could hear the sandhill cranes flying over, and they make their funny sound.
I get 5 of them out here on my property in the springtime. They come out here every year.
But
they're magnificent birds, especially when you watch them fly. They really are.
But we were waiting there for maybe about 20 minutes or so, and there was then all of a sudden this deer comes prancing out of the woods, and there is just standing there still.
It's usually a dog. It's not deer season.
It's not deer season, but it was a pronghorn. It's just 2 little prongs, a little young buck. But watching that thing and sitting there very still and watching this wildlife just come to life and near you. And
well, Doug, the thing is, as a creation show, we often talk about the fact that really nothing makes sense without, we obviously realize we believe there's a creation. We're young earth creation, so we believe it was very recent in time. But there was also a corruption and a catastrophe, and there was a pollution of the perfect world order. And what we're saying here, and what I think is amazing to me, is that no matter how corrupt, how fallen, how catastrophic things happen in the world, because the world is a broken world, yet through it all we can see God's handiwork still. I think throughout the brokenness of this world, the Lord allows us. He doesn't remove His hand entirely. That gives me hope, Doug. That's why you can sense His presence in a turkey blind, or when we're out going Grand Canyons or some other places. You can sense it because God has a way of out of corruption, calamity, brokenness, He can bring restoration and life and renewing. He can bring that. Despite that fact, He always has a backup plan. And to me, that's what makes the creation worldview the most tenable, the most exciting, the most viable to, number one, give us purpose, but gives us glimpses into eternity in here and now. And I think that's fascinating.
That's right. There's a word I'm using here called joy. And there was a scripture that I like. We used to sing this as a song. Therefore with joy shall we draw water out of the wells of salvation.
Oh, yeah, I kind of remember that. It's been a long time.
And in that day shall we say, praise the Lord.
Yeah, okay.
Remember that? That's back from the 60s, 70s, but
yeah.
Back in the Jesus people days. Remember, we used to sing scriptures a lot. And
that was the heart of that was really part of the Jesus movement. It was all about Jesus and most of your songs were right directly lifted from the scripture. A lot of times Psalms, but they were in Proverbs, a lot of other places too. But that was the neat thing about it, yeah.
And I've been realizing that, how much thankfulness has to do with our presence with God. It talks about in Romans chapter 1 how they knew God, but they weren't thankful. And that was sort of the trigger point where it led them down the road to being reprobate against God.
It's like the lepers. 9 of them never came back, and only 1 came back to thank him.
And it's sort of like missing this whole element of joy, of the whole purpose of why God created you, and being able to realize that God's presence is there, and if I was at the Living Rock just this week, and I had a weekend of fast, and I went over there to sit in the chair where 50 years ago I read the C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and I just felt this whole presence of the Lord with me as I was sitting there with my eyes closed, and he was just coming over me. And this is the type of thing that you can realize when you spend some time in the presence of God, asking God to be in your presence. And it's sort of like Adam and Eve, before they fell, they freely walked with the Lord in the midst of the Garden of Eden. I can remember this when we were on our river cruise this early September was when we were on the Danube River.
I've never seen the Danube River. I'd like to visit it sometime.
It's really beautiful, and but I got up early one morning, got up on the top deck where you can see everything, and everything was in mist, rising up over the river.
Yeah.
And this the mist was rising up, and you were being able to see the background of these all these painted houses behind you, and so and then that mist started to rise, and you started to see the blue sky behind it, and it was just an amazing time. And this is the type of thing that I'm basing this show about, is the times where we realize the hand of God is there. And there's one place that we visited a number of years ago where it's about as close as to what I imagine the Garden of Eden might have looked like. And that's in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
And the island of Kauai on the north end is where they get all the rain.
And then, isn't it one of the Grand Canyon of the East up there?
Grand Canyon of the Pacific.
I'm sorry, yeah.
The Waimea Canyon is beautiful, but Waimea Canyon comes from the south side on up, and it's sort of like desert on the south side.
Yeah.
But the north side is where all the trade winds bring the rain across.
Yeah.
And maybe every 20 or 30 minutes you get a little shower that comes in through, and you have all these waterfalls that are coming over the Na Pali coast, and you can, if you're in the Princeville area, you can see all these different things. There's you probably heard of the land of Hanalei. You remember the Puff Magic Dragon? That's
the Magic Dragon.
No, that's what's taken from the from this Hanalei Bay.
I did not even realize that.
And there's this beautiful double peak mountain up there. And you look at that, and there's this beautiful valley where they're growing taro root, and so it's all sort of like a floodplain where they're growing all this. But the place where I thought was the most beautiful in terms of being like the Garden of Eden was this a place called the Queen's Bath. And there's a path that goes to the Queen's Bath, and it goes down towards the ocean. But it goes through this lush forest of it was pine trees, but there's also a lot of broadleaf trees.
So we got pictures of this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what we have is you're going down this path. I went with my son-in-law and daughter and my wife. We went down through this path, and there was a little waterfall, and the little waterfall is called Hala Falls. And but if you look at the falls, but then take a right turn and you look at downstream from the falls, it's all this lush, beautiful plant growth that's in there that just makes it come vibrantly alive.
You know, but Doug, you say that like, and I reckon that's beautiful, because I've been on the island of Kauai, and it is gorgeous. But Doug, when we've been out to places like the Grand Canyon, that to me is equally beautiful, yet it comes out, it's like desolate.
Right.
But it has a beauty in its own way, and that goes back to my theme a little earlier about out of catastrophe. There's a book that John Morris wrote, you know, Grand Canyon, Monument to Catastrophe. And it's true that it's a monument, but we go out there, we see how God's redemptive plan works. I think about that in a metaphorical way about us.
That's right, yeah.
We were broken and desolated and corrupted and fallen. And out of that, He has created redemption. And He's raised us up to be like Himself. This is the restoration. And he lets us see this in nature. Some of the places we've seen, like I said, the Danube. Doug, I've been up on Isle Royal.
Right,
okay?
oh yeah.
And I've got a painting over here. I painted of it over there, many pictures. And the misty part, when you're in that quiet, misty thing, now this were houses in the background, it was all like wilderness. And you're just kind of enjoying it. I was in a rowboat. And then I got off and I was hiking the island, and it's so quiet. And sometimes you really do hear the small voice of the Lord. You really can hear it, or you feel like it's so close, you're intimate. But things like the Grand Canyon, Doug, when I'm walking down, I'm in awe. When we see those things, I go, wow, the power of God. It could have destroyed so much, but yet out of it, there's this beauty. It's just intense. Doug, how many times we go through the out west, southwest, we're driving through there and you go, wow.
All this eye candy.
There's all this eye candy, and you almost couldn't take it in. It was so beautiful. I mean, there's colors in the rocks. There's yellows and reds and umbers and you know, all these great you know, mixtures of rock, and yet we all know, we believe as creationists, this was a lot of the result of the flood and post-flood activity, and so it was destructive when it happened, but out of it beauty comes.
Yeah,
I think
that's where I think my brother Steve has really got it great with his job being working with the National Wild Turkey Federation, because he takes governors and senators out turkey hunting, and he gets paid for it. But here he is. Here I was all my life sitting in this cubicle, staring at the computer screen. And I was working for the DNR, but here he is. Whenever he goes out and enjoys the creation of God.
Outdoors,
And he took me up to Wilderness State Park. He's done this a couple of summers with me, where he sets up the BB gun range, but there's a spot up at Wilderness State Park which I thought was awesome. It was where this little creek goes out into the Lake Michigan, and there's a pond that's absolutely still, and it reflects the whole beauty of Lake Michigan and everything like that. And that was a spot where I really felt the presence of God.
There's a place up in the Upper Peninsula. It's kind of like there's like a little kind of a robe, I can't think of the name of the place of it now. The water is so clear. You see.
Well, that's Kichikipi. That's the big spring.
Yeah, do you have that list? Yeah, it's so gorgeous. So talk about that a little bit then.
Well, it's a big spring. It's actually, you can see go over it, and it's quite clear as glass. You got there's a platform that you stand on, and then
you pull yourself across.
Pull yourself across.
Awesome.
and it's about 60 feet deep, but you can see all these fish down at the bottom of it, and it totally reflects like still glass, that particular thing, and that sort of beauty just brings goosebumps to you, and when we were out in Arizona, remember we stayed at this place called Anderson Springs. You were with me. We stayed in that little, and it's on this little lake. You remember that?
I'm trying to remember that. No,
Yeah, that was when Steve came with us.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
And there was one time I was walking around that lake. It's it looks like
we would do hikes around it, yeah.
And there was one time where the lighting was just right and the lake was still, and I got some photographs of that, and that again is a moment. It's an artist's moment, where you're seeing colors, you're seeing things in proportion, you're seeing things in beauty, and it's just
how about that one spot up at Glacier National Park?
Oh yeah, Wild Goose Island on St. Mary's Lake.
Just look at it. I mean, you can't take a bad photograph.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect thing to do paintings out of. If you do, I love landscape landscape art as well. That's my favorite thing to actually paint. But I like doing portraiture and things like that too. But landscape art is my favorite, probably because it's God's creation. I just enjoy trees and lakes and mountains and mainly lakes and trees, but I like all of that stuff.
And even in that, you have some abstract stuff, don't you?
Well,
if you take like a big abstract landscape painting, and you take just one little portion of it.
Oh yeah.
You now have a little abstract.
Yeah, you do.
But it gives you a perspective on something that you haven't been able to see before. Yeah. And that's really what we're doing when we're doing science, is that we're taking something and magnifying it enough so that we're able to see a little bit more of what God made. And the more that you magnify something, the more intricate it gets. That's not true for something that man has made.
When man makes it, falls apart.
But if you take an electron microscope to your Ford car and magnify it down to this, you're going to see some of the rust and the pits.
You see pock marks and holes.
But so what you're going to see of something that God has created, even down to the molecular level, it has intricacy and beauty and magnified.
Well, yeah, you would with the biology, the microbiologic machines that do all
That's right,
Jerry Bergman talks about a lot of that. That just, every time I think about that one thing, transporting stuff from one part of the cell to another to get rid of stuff, and oh my goodness! And actually, this one thing he had a video one time. It was really cool. It was something that was almost like walking, and it was walking the bridge behind.
Yeah, that's a protein molecule called kinesin.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And it's kinesin because it's actually
moving,
pulling
like
a big
to bring this thing to one part to get rid of it out. It's incredible, And but that's so. Yeah, you're right. The more you break it down, it gets more and more complex with God's creation. I just think that, Doug, to me, I get fascinated with the fact that sometimes it'd be nice, it'd behoove us as believers to actually just go before God and say, I just want to enjoy you and what you've made and not ask for anything. The Lord wants us to ask for things, don't misunderstand me, but when all we do is petition, there's the prayer of praise, which is so good. You talk about, C.S. Lewis, you talk about that book, that Mere Christianity, but he wrote a book called Surprised by Joy. That was interesting because he married a woman named Joy, but the book really didn't have anything to do with that. But it was some things I think that we as believers, if we are dour and sour, we are just like the people with no hope.
That's right, yeah.
And I'm thinking to me, stop and enjoy the things that the Lord has created and made, and be amazed at the stuff that He allows us to discover. I think about all this stuff, like Derek's come up with stuff, you know, the guy's been on our show, and Jeff and other people have been there, the things you're allowed to discover, and he's given us permission to find out things. But it's always a joy just to bask in his presence. Like when you're in the middle of an outdoor forest, sitting in your room, contemplating the Lord. I mean, you can find him anywhere. But it's interesting how he gives us glimpses into himself with nature. I think, the heavens declare his handiwork, the earth is his footstool. I mean, it's the idea that God is revealing himself by what he has made. Now, we are not saying, like some people say, that nature is the 66th book of the Bible. That's right. Yeah. We're saying you can discover glimpses of God, but you're not going to get the revelation in the same sense.
Well, part of it is communing with God. It's a time for you to sit still, relax, and enjoy His presence, and expect Him to show up, and He will. This is something that God is able to give you peace, and He can take the worries out of you and just drain them right out. There's a scripture I'm going to read here.
Okay.
And this is in Psalm 37. And it says, "Do not fret because of those who are evil, or envious of those who do wrong. For like grass they will soon wither, like green plants they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret, it only leads to evil. But those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found, but the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity." That's one of my favorite Psalms, and it's
Psalm 37,
37, and it's where he says, "Don't fret, don't worry,"
and he knows, based on who we are and our temperament, that sometimes we are going to fret and worry. There is redemption and grace, but he's telling you the best part is trying not to do that. And the way not to do that is to focus on Him. Doug, I still remember the time when I had my heart surgery, and I felt so bad, and I was fretting about how I let God down because I was afraid I was going to die, and I was mad at myself because I was afraid. And here I've been a believer for over 30 years at the time, and I thought, why was I afraid? And I was kicking myself, and the Lord, He comes at me, He let me rant and rave because I was walking around the block trying to get my strength up, And I did it like 3 times, and every time the Lord says, "So what's your point?"
Yeah.
Okay, so what? What do you mean? And the 3rd time I go around, I give up, and He says, if I can't make you see what I'm talking about, it just feels like so right. He says, "No, I see. I'm God. I see everything. But your problem is you forgot that it's not about you. It's about me." And then I felt even worse for just about a nanosecond.
Yeah.
And He said, "But for me, it's about you. Let me worry about you. And you put your focus on me." Now, He knows we're not always going to do that, but that's the ideal. And I found when I do that, Doug, I'm not as afraid.
That's right. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm afraid. My wife, your sister, she's been beat up pretty bad, and I wonder if I'm going to have enough money to take care of her. Is she going to be okay physically? Is there something I do? There are things you fear. Is my health going to stay up good? There's all kinds of things, and the Lord knows all that stuff. But it's amazing, Doug, when you sit out and, like I say, sometimes going out into nature, going out in the back. I don't like to do it in the wintertime. I have to admit, I'm not a big winter guy. But in the summertime and spring, you go out there and just sit in the middle of the woods and think about the Lord's creation and who He is, and He made this for us, and He loves us with an unquenchable love, that helps the peace that passes understanding to come through. And it's an amazing thing. Even though we fail at that sometimes, there's always that redemptive act that He brings us to Himself. And I think that's why, by and large, Christians should be joyful people.
Right.
It disappoints me when I see believers not joyful. I know why, because I get the point too, and it sort of like irritates me when I see atheists who seem to be happy. Usually they're not. Usually atheists and people who don't believe in God are the most dour, sour people on the face of the earth. They're just not happy people because they have no hope. We have hope upon hope. You know, the greatest redemptive act of all history was to bring us back to Himself. And it's so hard for us to just do that. And you know what I think of liking it? It's like we'd rather eat a candy bar than an apple. You know, something that's rotten for us, but it tastes sweet to the thing. You know, that's who we are.
Yeah,
the Lord knows that, despite that He loves us, and He draws us to Himself. He woos us. And I think nature is one of those ways He does. I dug some of the places you've seen and we've seen together, just really do inspire me. I love
there's one place I want to mention is on this river cruise. There's a little town in Germany that we stopped to visit. And it's one of these picturesque, quaint little towns that have all these half-timbered houses with them, and it's all throughout this little town. And then there was this place where you go up the street, and it sort of goes narrowly to a little arched passageway. And you go through this passageway, and this is on the way up to the castle. But you go through this passageway, and it turns into this moss-covered path, totally covered with with trees and foliage. And you're going up this path, and it's kind of a good hike, a good climb up to this, a good hike up to this top of this mountain where this. Where this castle is, but it's sort of like going into this fairy tale.
Oh yeah. By the way, that reminds you, when I was in Ireland, we're getting short on time here, and I don't want to go over like I did last week. But when I was in Ireland, I swear there's a space. It was on the west side of Ireland, and we're going to the Arwen Islands. And there's some other spot we were going up. This part we were going up to the north part of Northern Ireland, and there was a spot I swear it was like out of Lord of the Rings, or something C.S. Lewis would have written. It was. I felt like a unicorn or a leprechaun was going to come over. It was so bright green, and there was this like bridge that went over to this little like crop of island, and you walk over this like wooden bridge over it, and it was just, I mean, so bright. I understand why they call it the Emerald Isle. We went there in April, and I thought Doug was going to be nothing but rain because it's in Ireland, but we had almost all blue skies, and it was so intensely blue, and the ground was so intensely green. It looked like it looked magical, and that's the Lord's creation, you know.
And the Napali coast, the Kauai, that's amazing places. These places, Crater Lake, Wizard Island, and Crater Lake. Seeing the bighorn sheep in Glacier National Park. Arches National Park.
Oh my gosh!
These places are magical. They're places that you and I've been. That's why we, from time to time, will organize an adventure and go out west and do things to make things more real in our particular thing. Well, we hope you enjoy our little travelogue tonight. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.